Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Salt Grain Podcast. I am your host, Holly McNamara, and I'm here with my very first guest, Will Flanagan. Thank you so much for coming, Will. I'm really excited to have
Holly,
you.
great to be here with you.
Awesome.
Thank you for the invite. I'm excited too.
Absolutely. So, um, I I have a whole list. I had to make a list because Will Flanagan is, I would like to call him the Renaissance man. Will Flanagan has so much going on. He's very successful. Will, I want to talk about your background a bit, and I want to talk about some specific things about your background and things that have occurred over the past. I'm sure you can guess what those things are. But
Sure.
just to give our listeners a summary, Will was the mayor of Fall River and again, Will, if I make a mistake, feel free to correct me. Um,
Okay.
so Will was the former mayor of Fall River, Massachusetts, from 2010 to 2014, so 5 years. He's also a radio show host, a very successful radio show host on the show WSAR. What's the name? Is it just the Will Flanagan Show?
Yeah, the Will Flanagan show. We kept it simple.
Cool. He also owns his own law firm, which I saw was founded in 2015, and you're still practicing law, right?
Slowing it down, but still active. Yes.
Yeah, you have a lot going on. You're a new dispensary owner called the Cosmopolitan in Fall River. That was launched in 2021, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so about 3 years, just under 3 years. I saw that there was a wedding there the other day.
Yeah, one of the bud tenders, Barrett Anselmo, really nice kid, young kid, and they wanted to come through with him and his wife and his bridal party and groomsmen. So, of course, what better place than to officiate a wedding than at the dispensary? We were family there, so come
That's
on through.
awesome. Were there
Yeah.
party favors?
Not on site, no, but
Yeah,
I'm sure there was to-go bags.
right, right. That's really cool. So you were also assistant DA from 2007 to 2008. Is that right? Um,
Roughly, yeah.
and you're an angel investor and an
Correct.
entrepreneur. So Will has a lot going on. He's been very dedicated to his community and the region, Bristol County and South Coast Massachusetts. But I want you to kind of talk about your background, how you decided to run for mayor, why you decided to run for mayor, and then I have some questions about, things that occurred during that time.
Yeah, well, when I decided to run for mayor, it goes all the way back to 2008, Holly. And Fall River was tumultuous at the time and really not due to anybody's specific actions. It was just what the country was going through. 2008, 2009, Massachusetts saw what was called 9 seat cuts. So a lot of the local aid, which cities like Fall River relied upon, was slashed in half, and it was slashed in half halfway through a budget year. So, George Bush was president at the time. He was leaving office. Barack Obama was coming in. There was a transition on Pennsylvania Avenue. Congress was going through some issues, and cities and towns like Fall River were seeing huge issues financially. There was a foreclosure crisis going on. The stock market was going through some issues. So you had layoffs in the police department, the fire department, the school department. Fall River had about 5 to 7 years of audits that were not completed.
Oh,
And
wow.
at that time, at that time, Bob Correa was the mayor. Really nice man. He's passed away, God rest his soul. But he was really dealt the full plate. And there was political upheaval in the city. Several city councilors decided to run for mayor. And here I am, only 29 years old. I'm an assistant DA working in the DA's office, fresh out of law school.
Wow, you were
And I'm
that
like,
young.
yeah, oh, yeah. I was the youngest at the time when I was elected. And what ended up happening was it was upheaval in the city. So I decided to run. And what I really did was a grassroots campaign. Me and Liz Souza would go out door to door, knock every day and every night. In fact, we knocked on over 10,000 doors. I had no money. I had no war chest. I think Bob Correa had hundreds of thousands of dollars in his war chest. He was a 30-year state representative. Kathy Ann Riveros was the top vote getter on the city council. She had tens of thousands of dollars in her war chest. I had nothing but energy. And we would go door knocking. I would get out of work, go door knocking on the weekends, wake up early. And then, I really didn't have much of a team with me. So a lot of it was me doing press releases, making phone calls. And
I didn't know any of this. This is incredible, Will.
yeah,
Go ahead.
on
Go ahead.
election night, I finished in second place. And it was really a stunner through the whole city, because even though I was born and raised here, a lot of people didn't really know me or know who I was. I was just a private citizen. And I finished in second place. And in Fall River, the way the political process works is the top two people go on to November. So Kathy Ann was in first place, and she had maybe about a several hundred vote lead on me. So it was close. And I finished in second. But after the September preliminary going into the November general election, it was just a tidal wave of support that came my way. And mainly because we were new, we were fresh, we were young, we were unblemished. We had a lot of good ideas. And I think people took a look at me and said, okay, he's young, but he's articulate, he's hardworking, he's sincere. He's born here, he's raised here. We're going to give him a chance. And I was elected mayor at the age of 29, and we hit the ground running.
That's absolutely incredible, Will. And so a lot transpired over those years. You were so young to start that. So I didn't realize how global the issue was for you to motivate you to run for office. It was like really a national thing for you to push you in that direction to really make a change. And that takes
It
a lot of
was.
guts.
It did, because, I think when I first started, people didn't take me serious at all. Some didn't, but most didn't. Even though I was an attorney, I think people looked at me and said, he's young.
You're young,
Uh,
right?
yeah, he has no money, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people criticized me because I didn't own a house at the time. I was a renter at 29 years old. I
Of
rented,
course.
right?
Yep.
And I wasn't I think in the minds of some, I wasn't tested. I was almost an unknown. So there was I think some ambiguity about who I was or what I could bring to the table. But for me, the city was, I think, at a crossroads. The country was going through a lot. And then I really saw a guy like Obama, who was young, energetic, articulate. And I said, gee, he ran a platform of hope and change, if you remember, right? A
Yep.
new hope, a campaign of hope and change. Yes, we can. And I think that momentum, that ideology, not only was fever pitched across the nation, but I think it also caught on locally.
That makes a lot of sense. And you want to ride that wave, and it's all about
We
timing
did.
with most things. And you ran a grassroots campaign. You pounded pavement, you talked to
Mhm.
people. And what I didn't realize when I ran, everyone always says, oh, it's about meeting people and shaking their hands and asking for their vote and going door to door. That's the best way to win. And I would always think, well, how is that possible? Isn't there like a marketing campaign you can run without having to go door to door? But there's no way around it.
No, and on the presidential race, there's just so many people. Yes, you do your campaign stops, your bond storms in states that are the swing states like Iowa or Florida. But when you see a presidential race, the candidates don't normally go to states that are a foregone conclusion, like Massachusetts Democrat, New York Democrat, California Democrat. It's those states that are swing states or states that are up for grabs, Pennsylvania being one of them. You see a lot of the candidates go there. They go to New Hampshire because that's one of the first states that votes in the presidential process. So, with that said, nationally it may work. On the governor's race, I think it's a mix of it. there's a lot of TV ads and newspaper ads, but the governor goes out and does a lot of shaking hands and events. When you run for mayor or select board or city council, there is no substitute for door-to-door handshaking,
Exactly.
eye-to-eye contact, because these are the people who live in Fall River, they live in Somerset, they live in Swansea, and a select person or a mayor has more of a direct impact, in my opinion, than a governor or a president, right?
I
You
totally agree. Yes.
you can't go to the White House, knock on the door, and meet the president.
Right.
But you can go to City Hall or Town Hall, walk into the select person's office or the mayor's office, say, I want to meet my mayor. So there's more of a contact between the elected official and the constituent. And I think that's why there was no substitute for grassroots campaigning at the local level. And that's why or one of the reasons why we were successful.
Yeah, I actually had people showing up at my house on Saturday mornings. I had to put an end to that.
Yeah, not a
But
surprise.
there are times, when you meet them for coffee or and you meet, like you said, meet them
Yeah.
at town hall. I used to have office hours all the time. And so I don't know about you, but when I ran in 2016 for selectman. I never usually use the term select woman. I don't know why I just said that. So when I
Select person, we'll keep it
select person, when I ran, everyone kept warning me, do you know what you're getting into? And I never wanted to be a politician. I was doing it because I wanted to help my community, and I just moved home and I bought a house, and I was like, what's going on here? And people kept saying, oh, do you realize what you're getting into? And I thought, well, how crazy can it be? And lo and behold, there's absolutely no way anyone can explain to you in words what you're actually getting into, and all of the craziness that transpires. And it's so rewarding and so fulfilling, but so stressful, and just so many different things come up. There are people out to get you. There are people that band together against you. And some of it just comes from thin air. There are people that just love doing that kind of stuff. So I don't know what you can and can't talk about, or what you may be sick of talking about this after all these years, but I wanted to talk about the allegations in 2015 that Jazel Correa made. Now, Jazel Correa, for the listeners' information, was also a former mayor of Fall River. He's actually currently in jail right now on, I can't remember how many counts that he was charged with, and is supposed to be there, I think, for the next 6 years. And the history with Jazel goes back far, as far as, you were in your position as mayor. So I wanted to talk about, if you could summarize, or if you want me to summarize the incident as far as what I know, and talk about like kind of the fallout from that. And I want to get into, first, just for our listener, describe what happened, describe what happened afterwards. But I really want to get into the fact that I admire you for the more I learn, even last night I was reading more about you, and I thought I knew most of it, but there's so much more that you have done for your community. And you continue to persevere, and you're very beloved. It's very apparent that the community loves you and always will, always has. And I admire that because, in Somerset, you've probably seen that I've been through a lot as a political figure, and I'm still, even as a resident, I'm still dealing with it. But what you have been through is incredible, and for you to still put yourself out there and be real, I want you to talk about what that feels like for you, how you keep your composure, how you keep yourself in the limelight after all of the craziness and the publicity and whatnot.
Yeah, well, let's go back. I think it was probably 2014, summertime 2014, and Fall River was going through a recall election. A petition came forward, and that petition really was the impetus because we did a pay-as-you-throw program. I think without that program, recall probably would not have been started or didn't go as far as it did. But we
What
had a
was the
pay-as-you-throw
program?
program.
Yeah.
Pay-as-you-throw. I think Somerset may have it. Swansea may have it.
Oh, pay as you throw.
Essentially,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah,
The trash bags.
exactly, trash bags, right? So there was a recall election or recall petition started in Fall River. And in order to get the petition forward, you had to get so many signatures. And Jazel Correa signed the recall petition, which I was caught off guard by because Jazel was very supportive of me. You know, he was always, I considered professionally friendly with me. And, you know, it makes it difficult to work with the city council, especially when you thought you were close with, if they don't think you belong in office or they were supporting a recall.
Yeah, it's a
So
huge
he had
stab in the
some,
back.
well, yeah, so, you know, we decided, you know, I had talked to him about it and he expressed what he expressed with me regarding it. So we ended up meeting outside of his office, which was on the waterfront. And it was later at night when we met. And looking back on it now, I should have never agreed to meet somebody late at night, even if it was a city councilor or not. The optics of it just does not look good, right? Something I wouldn't do now at 43 that I did when I was, 32 or 33. So we ended up meeting, and it's highly known now. Jazel said that my licensed firearm was with me at the time, and he felt threatened by it or he was uncomfortable by it. So he had went to the police. He filed a complaint against me, and the DA at the time, who was Sam Sutter, appointed a prosecutor to open up an independent investigation. Now, Sam Sutter also ran for mayor. So here I am, the mayor. You have a city councilor who makes a complaint against me. You have the DA who opens up an investigation against me now running against me. So it was a lot for me to go through at that time. So we had the election, and I ended up finishing second place. Several people ran, and Sam Sutter was elected mayor in the recall petition. So, looking back on it now, it's something that I learned from. Definitely, it was just bad judgment on my part because the optics just did not look good. Here you are, the mayor, meeting with somebody on the waterfront, which, back in the 20s and 30s, all bad things always took place on the waterfront at night, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it just was not handled well by me at the time, even though my intentions were pure and, I was innocent at the time. It just, I think, did not play well for me. And to go through an independent investigation, which I was cleared of, did have some effects on my life at that time. I know after I was no longer mayor, I had some job opportunities that were, good opportunities for me. They would have been very lucrative for me in government, actually. Working for a governor who was interested in hiring me, also a federal agency that was looking to possibly take me on. But when it came time to, no pun intended, pull the trigger on those jobs, they decided not to do it. And I get it. They're like, hey, Will, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't want to hire you. And then, we find out that you got to have to go to court over this. So it did cost me money. It cost me opportunities at that time. But, I lived through it. So here we are today.
It's incredible, Will. Um I watched that documentary, I guess you could call it a documentary that Mark Wahlberg's producers made.
Mhm.
Was Run This City, is that what it was called?
Yes, Run the City.
And yeah, so a quote that you had said on that documentary really has stuck with me. And you said, you come in as, I think you said, you come in as a hero, and if you stay too long, you end up a villain. And
Correct.
that resonated with me because, and I resigned a year early from the end of my second term. So I was also only in office for 5 years instead of 6. And it was how I felt things were becoming. People were vilifying me over almost nothing. And it made it something. And I said, I can't do this anymore.
Right.
For many reasons. And it's been, I'm finally now like becoming more of myself again, but it took me a good couple years to, I think, recover from what I went through. And I look at your story and I'm just like, oh my God, my story it's nothing compared to Will's story. Will went through
Right.
so much more. And so I'm like, and you inspire me to stay afloat and to keep going forward. Um, what do you think about that quote? Um, how do you feel about that? And the other thing is too, is that I just recently, actually last week, um, I was taken to court for something I didn't know that I did. Um,
Okay.
no one brought it to my attention until I was served. Um, so these folks at the southern end of town tried to get a harassment order against me. And mind you, I've had them blocked for years. I don't go near them because I'm afraid of them. I've asked them to leave me alone, publicly and privately. And they have been creating this case over the past 3 years and took me and tried to get the HPO. Now, luckily, the judge saw right through it and laughed them out of court, told them that they have nothing better to do. But I was a wreck for a good 20, and I only had 24 hours to prepare for it. So I was served by regular mail. Luckily, I got it in time, and the next day I had to show up, and it was like, well, if I get this HPO against me, I'm screwed. Like there's a lot of things that will fall out from that. And so that it really when I was reading last night about this whole thing with Jazel, um, I noticed that Jazel was saying first he was saying he felt threatened to sign the petition, and then he was saying that his fear was growing over time and that's why he didn't report it right away. And that just didn't sit well with me. And you don't have to relitigate this, but I just
Right.
it resonated with me because I'm like, okay, these people are claiming that I'm harassing them, but I've been the one asking them to leave me alone. So I really that little comment he made that was in the newspaper, I just, it really kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Well, if you think about it, right, you come in the hero. So in order to get elected, you have to be the opposite of what the town or the city was not happy with when they elected you, right? So when I came into office, I won every precinct in town, and I did that for 3 straight elections. In
It's
fact,
amazing.
the election before the recall, I want to say I won with over 70% of the vote. It was, we were doing really well. Parks were being built, playgrounds were being built, schools were being built. The city's finances were on an upward trajectory. Unemployment was down. You look at every major category, and we were trending in the right direction. But we hit turbulence, right? A grant was not renewed. They were looking at layoffs in the fire department because the grant wasn't renewed. And because of cost of living adjustments and contractual obligations, your revenue does not equal the cost of government. And every city and town mostly goes through these types of issues. Fall River, Somerset, or Swansea, or any place in Bristol County is not immune to that. But eventually, the longer you stay in office, you probably are going to lose votes. And it's not illogical to think that way. You somebody comes to you and you can't help them, so maybe they get a little angry at you. Or if somebody wanted the job and you could not fulfill that request, or you said something that somebody didn't like, so no, they're no longer voting for you. And it could be something as simple as, hey, I saw the mayor out to dinner last night, he didn't come over and shake my hand, I'm not voting for him
Yes,
anymore.
that's happened to me
Maybe,
before. Yeah,
right? And chances are I did not even see you at the restaurant.
right.
That's probably why I didn't come shake your hand. So it could be the littlest of things that people get upset with you about. So when it goes time to the ballot box, you're probably going to lose votes over time and not gain them over time. And a shelf life for an elected official today, in my opinion, is not as long as it was maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago. You have social media now.
Exactly.
Before, It would be the union halls, the beauty parlors, the bar rooms where people would talk politics. Now, because of social media, those types of locations, those types of places, um, are now on platforms such as Facebook or TikTok or X or Instagram. And what can also be added to that is they become anonymous. So you
Right.
don't have to face or name to them. So, with social media, I think it's really changed how politics or elections are carried out. So it really is a different time.
I totally agree with that. And I feel like in 2016, I mean, social media has been around longer than that, but I think right around the time I was running for office in 2016 was when social media started to really ramp up. And
Mm.
people in town had said, because I was heavily using social media to run my campaign, and people in town that have lived here their whole lives were like, we've never seen a campaign like this. And I just moved back from California, so I was like, well, I don't know why, but now I know why. So but you're totally right. And social media, it promotes the spread of misinformation, and it promotes the bullying, and it promotes personal attacks. And you're so right that it just the shelf life, is a great way to put it. The shelf life is significantly lower than it used to be because people, it's they become fatigued. It's like election fatigue, campaign fatigue. They get tired of hearing over and over and over again. So that's when I pulled out, I was like, okay, I've had enough. You've clearly not had enough, but the folks that were coming at me at the time, I said I've had enough. So I totally
It's
agree.
understandable.
Yeah. Um, let's see. So there was something else in the that I was reading last night about that incident with Jazel. Just kind of a funny thing. You said your Ford Explorer didn't have a dashboard.
Yeah,
I had to ask.
yeah, it was one little. That's what people remember probably the most out of all that. How many years later has it been? 10 years later, a decade later. I think Jazel had said he took out a firearm and placed it on the dashboard.
Yes, that's what it said.
And what the statement I made, the intent was of it, well, the dashboard slanted, not
Yeah,
like the types of cars where the dashboard's flat and you can place things on it. And I'm thinking about like, my father had a Lincoln where the dashboard was flat and
right.
like people would always put like a Virgin Mary on the dashboard.
Yes.
Sometimes, right? People in cars in the 70s and the 80s. So I'm like, they're all cars have a dashboard. Let's get that straight. But in the Ford Explorer, if anybody's ever been in one, it's a
I used to
slanted.
own one. You're right.
So if you put a piece of paper on it, it's going to slide off. So it's not convenient for holding things. And in a 2-second sound bite, that's what went viral.
Of
So
course.
that's what I meant by it.
I agree. I used that my first car was a Ford Explorer.
But shame on me, though. I look back on that, and as an attorney, I tell people don't talk to the media. You got to, exercise your Fifth Amendment right. Remain silent. Nothing's good's going to come out of talking about it. But here I am. I go on the offensive. I'm being accused of something that I know I didn't do, or at least I didn't intend to do. If Jason was afraid, I didn't mean to do anything to make him afraid. So it's like, okay, I'm talking to every media outlet that wants to talk to me. I'm not refusing any interviews. I'm still maintaining my job as mayor and showing up places. But anytime I made a statement, it was always analyzed and dissected and picked apart. And it wasn't the good things that the media was looking for to say, okay, and sometimes it was, but mostly it was,
The
okay,
clickbait.
what can we find? Yeah, what can we find to get that extra headline, or what can we find to sell more copies or get a bigger audience? And I look at the media, a lot of newspapers were sold, a lot of TV ratings occurred, a lot of radio views or tune-ins happened. It was what people were talking about. So what I get upset with sometimes as a citizen, as a resident, is the media becomes more about ratings, and it's a business, right? The media is a business, and the media has to pay a salary. They have bosses, they have overhead, they got to keep costs going. And with that said, sometimes you lose track of the integrity of the news, and sometimes you generate the news in order to get a rating or get a viewership. And that's unfortunate because the people who are part of that um, get used and spit out in the process.
You're so right. And it's such a double-edged sword, in my opinion, with the media and talking to the media, because you want to defend yourself and you don't want them to make up the story without having heard from you. But at the same time, you're 100% correct. They just take things in sound bites. And over time, I've learned to figure out which journalists I can trust, which ones I can't. And again, it's harder, like you said, with social media. It just kind of muddies the water and makes it harder to figure out, well, what's true, what's not, who twisted what. There are too many voices, and it's exhausting. um, so what? So I was talking to someone about your successes and all of this, and I kind of already touched upon this, but I'm curious to know how, after all of this, how you're able to remain cordial with the people that actually successfully recalled you. And do you ever feel like, so for me, I try to stay true to myself. I try to still have a sense of humor. I don't want to be a polished politician, even though I'm not really technically one right now, but I try to be myself. And I feel like there are a lot of times, I know there's a time and a place for certain things, but a lot of times it's hard to let your hair down to be yourself. And so do you ever struggle with that? You don't seem to struggle with it, for the record,
Oh,
but
oh.
that's amazing. So how do you maintain that? Like, how do you manage that? I think a
I
lot of
never
us
took
have a hard time with it.
Yeah, I never took it personal. Even though the attacks were personal sometimes, or people tried to be funny at my expense, I never took it personal. And sometimes I even found it entertaining or amusing. Um, and I look back at it, the amount of people who know me personally can probably count on one hand, right? That can actually say they know me, or they spent that amount of time with me, or they actually know who I am or what I'm about. For those who didn't, it was what they perceived me to be, or it's what they thought I was, or it's what they were not happy with. So I really can't get upset or offended by someone who makes a comment about me who I really don't even know, or I wouldn't even be able to recognize if they were standing in a phone booth, right?
Right.
So it's like, how am I going to get upset about that? Or why am I going to, take that personally? I never did, and I don't. And even today, a lot of the people who were involved in that recall, well, I'll talk to, or they'll talk to me. They'll see me at the supermarket or at a restaurant, or, at my place of employment. And they're like, hey, well, how are you? Hey, I'm good. How are you doing? How's the family? My family's good. How's your family? It's small talk, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I never took it personally, even for those who I think were trying to do bad to me and hurt me. I never took it personally because, it was just business at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They had an agenda they were looking to accomplish, and they were going to accomplish that at any cost, whether they wanted to recall me or they were looking to, remove me from office. They were looking to do what they thought was beneficial to them. And really, sometimes that's human nature. People are going to do what they want to do if it's going to help them. And sometimes people do it at any costs. So, how can I get upset with somebody or get angry with somebody who I don't even know? I never took it personal.
That's such a great perspective, and it's something that people always say, well, just don't take it personally, which I
But
struggled
we're
with.
all persons, right? How can you
Right,
not when we're all persons, right?
right, exactly. And to get to that place where, I'm finally, it took me about 6, 7 years I struggled very much not taking it personally, and I was taking it personally. And I kept remembering everyone saying, like, don't take it personally. But it's so much easier said than done. But now I'm finally at the point where I I truly don't care what people that I don't know say about me. I don't. And I used to know, I knew that that's where I needed to get the point that I needed to get to, but it took me all of those years. So I commend you again, because that's such a hard thing, I think, for humans. Like you said, we're all people. It's just very
Right.
hard for us to do. So you're,
And sometimes people are right too, right? So, I'll read a comment and somebody will make a comment on something and, it makes me think, or, like, oh, maybe I that was right, or they were right. So, I don't block it out, or, I don't get upset about it. I'll take it and use it for what it's worth, right?
yeah,
Use it for what it's worth.
yeah, and that's how we should all do it. I think that's excellent. Um, so if you had to do it all over again, what would you do different? You kind of mentioned a couple things that you would do differently. Um, what would you do differently? But an additional question to that is, even after all of the bad PR, I mentioned this earlier in the podcast that Fall River would most likely reelect you. You've risen from the ashes of your recall, and you're, like I said, considered one of Fall River's most popular mayors. So the two questions: what would you do differently, and why do you think that you are considered one of the most popular mayors? Now I'm asking you to toot your own horn.
Yeah, it's tough for me to do. I usually um to do things differently. I don't think you got to look back on it and say, be more inclusive, listen to the people more. I think it was clear, unequivocally clear, that the trash bag program was not going to be accepted by the residents of the city. And even though it was awarded by the federal government, the EPA tooted and toted our successes. It was going to increase recycling, decrease cost. On the surface, it was a great program. However, the people just didn't want it. And you have to listen to the people. If you're going to get involved in government, or if you're going to be an elected official, you got to make sure that the people are first and you got to listen to them. Because if not, you're not going to last long. And with that said, if we didn't do the pay as you throw program, I do not believe that the recall would have ever taken off the ground. That was like the kickstart for the recall. So, you, in looking back at it, no matter how right you think you are, no matter how good the program is, if the people don't want it, they don't want it, and you can't do it, because if you do go forward and try to do what they don't want, it's not going to work. You got to build. You got to build as much of a consensus as you possibly can, and keep in mind, there's always going to be dissenters. There's always going to be people who disagree with what the majority want to do. So 100% of the people aren't always going to be happy. Very rarely does that happen. So you got to do what the people want. And as far as my own success, I think that just comes from keeping it real, being honest and sincere, and not having any ulterior motives. I feel that when people are either deceitful or try to do things that are not right, people can see through the bullshit. And people don't want to be bullshitted. They don't want to be lied to. They just want somebody who's going to be honest with them. So the more honest you are, the more real you are, the more sincere you are, the probably more successful you're going to be in life, Holly. And that's what I try to live by. Also, I always strive not to hurt anybody. You can't hurt people. If
Right.
you're going to go out there and be an asshole and try to hurt people, and be malicious,
Yep.
you gotta generate bad karma, and karma always comes and bites you in the ass.
Yeah.
Although a lot of my decision making has been good, a lot of my instincts are good. That's why I've been successful. I feel that one of the reasons why I've got to where I have gotten to is, one, I believe in God, but number two, I've been good to people, and the nicer I am, and the more good karma I put out, and the more people I help, I think the better my life is and the better I feel about it. Even to this day, people come up to me and say, "Hey, do you remember you helped me? You helped my mom, or you helped my dad or my brother." I've helped so many people in life, I don't remember, but
Yeah.
it made a difference in their life. And even though for me, it was just something I did normally, for them, it was the biggest thing that happened in their life at that time. And they'll never forget that. So you got to help as many people as possible in life. And I think that's what life is all about. It's about taking care of your children. It's about being a good person. And it's about helping people along the way.
I love that, Will, and I couldn't agree more. I think that, and it applies, that resonates very much with me. I just feel like you can't, just like you said, you can't, people see through when you have that ulterior motive. They eventually see through it. We all have instincts. You can tell when, usually you can tell when someone's lying. And sometimes it's harder to tell, but like you said, you just have to be true to yourself, and that's the only way to keep people's trust. And and it kind of goes back to the trash bag program. You genuinely, I think people realize that you genuinely thought that that was a good thing for the city, and so
Correct.
you were trying to. And I do have a question about that though, because you did say you have to listen to the people, but where do you draw the line? If the people don't know what's good for them, how do you, sometimes you have to make that hard decision, and they will come around, but how do you, I don't really know how you can determine. I struggle with it too. Like, where do you,
Yeah.
I'm an engineer, so I'm black and white. No, this is good, and you have to do what's good. um,
Right.
so it's hard.
It's not a math problem, right? We
Right.
look at math, 2 + 2 = 4, right?
Yep.
So it's more of a course in psychology or a course in sociology where it's about thought and um, feelings, and sometimes what's good today is not good tomorrow. Um, so I don't think you can say, okay, this is when I got to go against the majority, or this is when I support the minority. Um, it's just about instincts, and some are better at it than others. And
Mhm.
not everybody who's elected is going to have a long shelf life, especially in today's day and age. I think more and more you see it where either people get into politics or government and say, hey, this isn't for me, or they get into it and they don't do well. We saw, a senator from New York who was just recently accused of, basically stealing. And he had so many gold bars in his closet, and he was taking trips.
Yep.
Senator Menendez, right?
Yep.
So sometimes people get involved in government and they exploit it, and they put profit over people, and it becomes more about self-interest
Right.
against interest of the people. And those types of politicians don't do well. They get rooted out very quickly. Um, but
And
for
then
the
people
for
see
the
through it.
ones who and they see through it. But for the ones who get involved and they're sincere and they're hardworking and they really want to make a difference, those people come in, and I think a lot of times they get burnt out, um, or they do a term or two and they move on and say, I'm going to focus back on my family or my career. So I think it's rare in today's day and age where you're going to see an elected official who serves for 20, 30 years, especially on the local level. A guy like Ed Lambert did that. Carlton Viveros, where they served 12 years. That's like the peak standard. Where if you can pass that echelon, I guess you did something good. But those days are over. Even locally, you got Mayor Coogan, who's probably going to get elected to his third term, and he's probably not going to want to run for a fourth term. So mostly that 4 to 6 year window is, I think, what people are going to be doing going forward in government. And those long-term elected officials, I think they'll be few and far between.
I totally agree. And now,
But
perfect
also, let
segue.
me say this though. Yeah, let me
Yeah.
say this.
Yeah.
the quality of the candidates too. I think you really got to look at. So,
Yes.
does what we talk about keep people from not wanting to run? You don't want your if you're a parent with small children, you don't want to be at a dinner table at a restaurant and somebody come up and point their finger in your face. It's going to scare your children. Um, if you got a successful job, you don't want to be taking time away from your job in order to do the work of the town or the city.
Right.
Or if you just like your free time and you want to go fishing, that's less time you got to go fishing because you're at a board meeting or you're going to a conference or you're having office hours. It takes a special type of person to do what we did. And I think sometimes because of the barriers or the negativity that surrounds the type of work that we did, it keeps the quality of people from getting involved in it. And that could be, that's sad in my opinion.
It's very sad, and it goes back to social media amplifying everything. After I resigned, I felt very alone because not only do the good people don't want to run, but they don't even want to speak up. They don't want to talk online. They don't want to talk offline. They don't want to go to meetings. And I
They're
understand.
afraid.
Very afraid, very afraid, and rightfully so. I mean, they see what I went through, what you went through, what folks like us went through, and they don't want. I don't blame them. I wouldn't wish that upon anyone. But it's unfortunate, and there has to be. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'm constantly trying to find a way to fix that. I don't know how you fix that. But I think it's a much bigger problem than any of us can solve. And but yeah, it's I think it takes support. You have to really look for your support and hold on to it and keep everyone engaged. But it's a lot of work to do that. I remember feeling very alone, like I was on an island, like no one's hearing me. No one's helping me. It's just me. Everyone's scared. Even my own mom was like, I don't know. So,
there's a quote I say in politics that people are like shadows. When it's sunny, they're by your side, but when it's cloudy, they're nowhere to be found. Right.
that's an
So,
amazing quote.
when the sun's shining, they're right there by your side. But when the storms come in and it's cloudy and it's rocky, you're looking around and you're there by yourself.
That's exactly, that is the perfect description.
Right.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly how it feels. And it's hard. It's so hard. So again, I admire you for you just continue to put yourself. So thank you for being an inspiration. Um, One more question. So you mentioned it already, and I think I know your answer, but not to spoil it, but I heard that. Now, to be clear, I don't know Sam Sutter very well. I did meet him, and we had a great conversation this past year, just general stuff about politics. But Mayor Coogan, I've met him once. We've never really spoken, so I really don't know them that well. But I do know that I have heard that Sam Sutter tends to take credit for the South Coast Marketplace and Amazon, and you brought that in, correct?
Yeah. I started it, one more so than the other, with South Coast Marketplace. Our administration started the meetings, and especially writing the letters and showcasing the property. I had several meetings with the owners of the Old Harbor Mall. I contacted the DeMoulis brothers Market Basket. So we set the groundwork in place and kept things going. Amazon, we put a lot of work into that, especially with Ken Fiola, who was involved in both projects. And that was the great thing about Ken, because even though the mayors were changing, he was like the consistency, the glue to those projects. So even though a mayor would come in and come out, he was always there so we can keep the ball rolling. And you need people like that in government, especially
Yes.
to have some type of consistency. So Amazon, that was a touchdown project for us, no doubt about it. South Coast Marketplace, we definitely got the ball rolling on it. But then again, it's politics, right? So you can't be surprised for what people say or what they take credit for. And that's why the voters got to go out there and do their research and, really find out who they're voting for and why they're voting for that person. So again, if somebody says, I took credit for this project, doesn't bother me any bit. It's a big team. As long as the project came to Fall River, that's all that matters. And with Amazon, it started out where first Amazon was looking to come to the region. Then they were looking to come to Massachusetts. Then they narrowed it down to about several cities or towns. And then it came down to Florida was the place they were going to be. South Coast Marketplace, different type of project. We had the Harbor Mall here. We just needed to revitalize it.
Yeah.
And with the revitalization, it was okay. We're going to work with the owner. We're going to transfer it to the new owner. We're going to make sure that we do the best we can with the permitting so that they don't get bogged down in the red tape. And then we need some good anchor tenants, whether it was the movie theater, whether it was Market Basket, Starbucks, whatever. We wanted to make sure that the marketplace was being vibrant and that it was contributing to the economy. But also, we worked on the waterfront, the leveling of Route 79 and taking down the spaghetti ramps. That was a project that Bob Correa started. Again, my administration took the ball over the goal line. We got a lot of work done with it. And I haven't been in office for 10 years, but my fingerprints and my DNA are all over that project because, we were with Governor Patrick's administration. We were with the Obama administration, making sure that the funding was coming in, whether it was from federal highway or mass highway, to get that project completed. So another one like South Coast Rail, that goes probably all the way back to Carlton Viveros as mayor. 43 years later, because we never took our eye off the ball, we were able to hopefully see rail service, and we will see rail service next year to Boston. So,
it's next year? Yeah. I was wondering. Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be next year. Summertime next year, you'll be able to pay the toll and purchase the ticket and go to South Station, downtown Boston. It's going to be probably less than 90 minutes to get from Fall River to South Station. So these projects take time, and you really can't get much done in your 1 or 2 years that you're in office, other than, probably some planning and possibly getting some applications done for permitting. But as you know, there's so many different agencies you've got to deal with, whether it's a federal agency, a state agency, a local town border agency. And these things takes time, especially if they wind up in court. So from the idea that, yes, I want to do this, to the shovel in the ground, to the ribbon cutting, it could be a lifetime project.
Yeah, absolutely. And now with that, do you have a prediction for the outcome of this Fall River mayor's race between Coogan and Sutter?
I'm going to keep it PC now.
That's okay.
I know them both, so.
They're great. They are. And I mean, I really don't know them well at all, but I had such a great conversation with Sam Sutter. It was actually about social media and,
Sure.
and rumors and defamation and stuff like that. So really great conversation. But
I wish them both well.
Yes, great answer. Well, thank you so much, Will. It's been such a great time talking to you, and maybe I'll have you on again soon if things the podcast goes well.
I have a feeling it will.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I will keep you posted, and best of luck. And I will be shopping at your Cosmopolitan dispensary as usual. It's amazing. Everyone go check it out in Fall River. The Salt Green is a podcast where politicians stop pandering and start getting real. This podcast is me, Holly McNamara, various co-hosts and guests. Our post-production is done by Pixella Films. For more content and all social media links, you can find us on thesaltgrain.com. Thank you for joining us while we take you into our world of public service, and be sure, as always, to take everything with a grain of salt.